Princess Lilibet Diana had been christened. Why would they use a title for their children that represents an institution they loathe so much? You set out to destroy you. You destroyed yourselves in this country with your ludicrous, hypocritical behaviour. The truth be told, what you just said is complete and utter garbage by the British media, the public and the royal family that they've all now abandoned. That's the truth.
Prince William doubles down. According to multiple sources, it's now a matter of when, not if, he strips Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of their royal titles.
Never pregnant at all. Instead, the videos embolden conspiracy theorists. They're calling it Megspiracy, and the pair are being subjected to yet more merciless ridicule.
Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scandal has entered the mainstream media domain.
Most people see Meghan Markle as confident, outspoken, and always in control of the spotlight. But behind all the polished interviews and carefully timed appearances, there's been a different story quietly building up. And lately, things have started to feel a lot more intense. There's now a wave of discussion picking up, centered around claims that Piers Morgan has brought forward details about Archie and Lilibet that are raising eyebrows again. Not confirmed facts, but definitely the kind of claims that get people talking. This situation is starting to shift the conversation into something bigger. Questions about privacy, about timing, and about how much of the public story really lines up.
Harry and Meghan have never provided any evidence for that highly incendiary claim. It's not like they haven't had the chance to. After all, they pumped out 6 hours of self-indulgent bilge on Netflix, trashing Britain and the press for its racism.
So what exactly is being suggested here? And why is it getting so much attention right now? Let's break it down. Meghan's pregnancy story, at least publicly, followed a path people have come to expect. The birth took place at Portland Hospital, a place already linked to royal history. Several members of the extended family were born there, so on the surface, it all seemed familiar. But this time, the reaction felt different.
The Netflix series released to the world this morning is packed with, well, not really revelations, are they? It's sort of rehashed old revelations with a new twist. As it turns out, we've apparently been wrong all along. Britain is a nasty, racist hellhole where only magnificent Meghan stood up to all this, and the world's biggest victim.
People weren't just watching, they were questioning. And right at the center of that conversation was Piers Morgan, who didn't hold back when these claims started circulating. During one of his segments, he openly questioned whether everything in the timeline added up the way it was presented. He even pushed the point further, asking, so what actually lines up here? Making it clear he wasn't convinced by what he was seeing. Now, to be fair, none of this has been officially confirmed. But from a commentary standpoint, what he was pointing at were what he believed to be inconsistencies. Things like shifting timelines, details that didn't quite match, and moments that seemed a little too perfectly presented.
Do you think if Kate and William did this,
do you think they'd ever release it?
If they did,
do you think Kate would release a twerking video, heavily pregnant at the bedside?
Would people say things like that?
The thing is, these two will sell anything about their privacy.
A lot of the royal watchers were complaining that they felt like her posts on social media where she barely shows the kids is almost taunting the king, who doesn't know these children, and how unfair this is.
According to his take, it wasn't just small differences. He suggested there were larger gaps, notes that didn't align, public appearances that didn't match expected timelines, and visuals that raised questions for some observers. One of the biggest talking points, the way certain photos and videos appeared over time. Some viewers noticed that in different clips, the baby bumps seemed to change position or shape. Now, realistically, that can happen for many normal reasons. Clothing, posture, camera angles, all of that plays a role. But Piers framed it differently. He suggested that the variations weren't random at all, but part of a carefully managed presentation. In his view, every appearance looked planned, from lighting to angles to the overall message being delivered. Again, that's his interpretation, but not something confirmed. He also questioned the public timeline itself, suggesting that what was shared publicly might not fully match what was happening behind the scenes.
Crisis won't die down until the irrefutable truth comes out.
According to his claims, certain dates and movements didn't fully connect, and that raised more questions for those already paying close attention. He even mentioned what he described as insider information, things like schedules, internal notes, and hospital-related details that, in his view, didn't line up cleanly with the public narrative. But here's where it gets important. These are still claims, not verified facts. Still, the conversation kept building. At one point, he expressed frustration, saying he felt like any questions were immediately dismissed, and that simply pointing out inconsistencies was being labeled unfairly. From his perspective, he wasn't creating theories. He believed he was highlighting things that deserved a closer look. He also painted Meghan not as someone being guided by the system, but as someone shaping the story.
Harry and Meghan, it's more a case of never reign and never abstain, especially when it comes to nauseating self-publicity, which invariably backfired.
And Meghan playing games that resulted in people unnecessarily questioning things. Again, every toxicity thing is result of them.
Herself. According to his viewpoint, everything, from appearances to messaging, seemed tightly managed. He even suggested that moments connected to motherhood were presented in a very controlled way, almost like scenes being carefully prepared. And again, that's his interpretation. He pointed to examples like reports of severe morning sickness while still appearing active in public, or moments where she spoke about feeling isolated while also being seen with ongoing support around her. To him, those details didn't fully connect. Others, of course, would argue there are completely reasonable explanations for all of that.
They're legally covering their backs. There's just too many unknowns. And then, of course, we have that the doctor that allegedly delivered Lily quit her practice 2 weeks after giving birth to Lily or delivering Lily. That sentence there is missing.
But the discussion didn't stop there. He even questioned the birth story itself, suggesting there may have been multiple versions prepared depending on how things unfolded publicly. He compared the whole situation to something closer to a production, where timing, emotion, and delivery all played a role in shaping how the story was received. And when looking back at the high-profile interview with Oprah Winfrey, he suggested that even that moment felt carefully structured for maximum impact. Now, whether people agree or disagree with that take, one thing is clear. This isn't just about one moment anymore. It's about how the entire story is being viewed, questioned, and re-examined in real time. As these claims started spreading, the reaction online got intense fast. Some people jumped in to defend Meghan, saying the whole thing felt unfair and targeted. Others weren't so quick to brush it off. They felt like there were too many unanswered questions to ignore.
Now they want to give their kids the titles of prince and princess, even though they don't live anywhere near the royal family, they don't do any duties, they do nothing to deserve it. They live in a mansion in Montecito in California and use their own royal titles to make.
And right in the middle of all that noise, Piers Morgan stayed loud and confident, even calling for a response. But Meghan, she said nothing. No interviews, no statements, no direct replies, just silence. And depending on how you look at it, that silence either kept things calm or made the speculation grow even more. From a commentary perspective, Piers clearly used that moment to push the discussion further. He kept pointing out what he believed were inconsistencies, and the more he talked about it, the more attention it pulled in. Some longtime supporters started to question things. Others who had been very vocal before suddenly went quiet. The conversation didn't just stay the same, it shifted. One of the biggest claims he kept repeating was that there could have been multiple versions of the birth story prepared in advance, all designed to shape how the public would receive it. Now again, that's a claim, not something confirmed, but it definitely added fuel to the discussion. And then the focus widened, because people didn't just look at Meghan anymore, they started comparing. One name that kept coming up was Catherine, Princess of Wales. After each of her children were born, she stepped outside the Lindo wing just hours later, standing in front of cameras looking calm, polished, and completely composed. High heels, styled hair, full makeup, holding her newborn while photographers captured the moment. And it wasn't just once, she did it 3 separate times. Those moments became iconic. For a lot of people, it set the standard of what royal motherhood looked like: open, traditional, and shared with the public. But here's the thing. It wasn't really about appearance. It reflected something deeper, a sense of duty, of tradition, and a willingness to include the public in a major life moment.
Were dealt with a bit more, you could call it aggressively, when it came to errant members of a royal family. You sent them off to war and hoped that war took care of the rest, sort of thing. And so I think in this sort of modern era, you do actually need some way to, discipline may sound like a harsh word, but to share with them, hey, you're part of this. You have to be a situation like Harry, because Harry and Meghan left in part because they thought they could just do whatever the heck they wanted. Nobody was going to tell them.
They kept telling the world how ghastly the monarchy is. It's a prison camp. All the royals want to get away from it, but they can't because they're trapped in the world of titles and privilege. And now they want to give their kids the titles of prince and princess, even though they don't live anywhere near the royal family. They don't do any duties. They do nothing to deserve it. They live in a mansion in Montecito in California.
For many watching, it felt genuine, like a shared experience. Now on the other side, Meghan's approach felt very different to some observers. Instead of that same clear, public-facing style, her journey seemed more private, and at times a bit harder for people to follow. And this is where a lot of the discussion started building. In some appearances, her baby bump looked very noticeable, round, prominent, and carefully supported with both hands. Her movements seemed slow and cautious, like she was protecting something delicate. But then, in other moments, things looked different. There were photos where the bump appeared smaller or positioned differently, not subtle changes either. Noticeable enough that people started pointing it out almost immediately. Now, to be fair, there are completely normal explanations for that. Angles, lighting, clothing, posture, all of those can change how things look on camera. But for people who closely follow royal appearances, these details stood out. And it wasn't just about how things looked, it was also about how she moved. At times, she appeared very careful, walking slowly, holding her stomach, moving like every step needed attention. But in other clips, she seemed much more relaxed, walking quickly, bending down, turning easily, even wearing heels without any visible discomfort.
This case about whether you think the birth was real, whether you think there was a surrogate, whether you think Meghan was wearing a moon bump, the fact is, Harry and Meghan lied. Buckingham Palace lied on their behalf. There was a complete cover-up over the birth of Prince
Harry and Meghan is a bit like criticising the police force. I often criticise the Met Police. My uncle was a commissioner in the Met Police. Doesn't mean that I don't believe in having a police force. You can criticise the monarchy and say, here are the fault lines, and do it clumsily.
But why would they want to inflict on their children royal titles that make them part of the royal family worldwide and expose them to the misery and pain and trauma which Harry tells us he suffers on an hourly basis, normally for large checks?
And that contrast, that's what caught people's attention. Because it didn't seem like gradual changes over time, it looked sudden. One day, very cautious, I said the next, completely at ease. Now again, pregnancy experiences can vary a lot from person to person. That's important to remember. But from a public perception standpoint, those quick shifts led people to start looking closer. Screenshots started circulating. Photos were compared side by side. But timelines were created. And once people started lining everything up like that, the conversation only got bigger. It wasn't just about one moment anymore. It became a pattern people were trying to understand. Online discussions exploded with people sharing different viewpoints, asking questions, and trying to piece together what they believed they were seeing. And once that kind of attention builds, it doesn't slow down easily. Over time, something started to shift in how people were looking at this whole situation, and not everyone felt comfortable saying it out loud. At first, it was just small doubts, little things people noticed in photos, but once Piers Morgan brought up claims about possible documents, for some viewers, that benefit of the doubt started fading fast. People began asking simple but direct questions. How could a baby bump appear so different in such a short time? How could someone seem to struggle with movement one day and then move freely the next? Now, to be clear, none of this is confirmed. But from a commentary angle, these are the kinds of things that got people looking closer. Then came what some described as the biggest turning point. I talk about internal schedules. According to circulating claims, there were notes outlining Meghan Markle's appointments, movements, and official duties during her pregnancy. At first glance, that sounds normal. Public figures usually have detailed schedules. But the issue people pointed to was this: some of those reported schedules didn't seem to match what was seen publicly.
How did it get there, Omid? Surely you as the author, I mean, you must be furious, right? You must be demanding. Heads roll. And you want names, don't you, ironically? Omid, about who did this to you? Who besmirched your reputation as an author? I would, Omid. I'd want to know right now, especially if I was trying to convince the world that I had nothing to do with it myself, and I'd never ever put these names in writing, and maybe some lawyer had come along and told me not to. I mean, that couldn't possibly have happened because you've given us your word, and as I've established so far in this monologue, your word is your bond and should be taken as sacrosanct. Well, I'm going to cut through all this crap. I'm going to tell you the names of the two senior royals.
There were suggestions that hospital-related appointments were listed on the same days Meghan was photographed attending public events across London. Not quick stops either, but full appearances. And that's where things started raising eyebrows, because logically, people began saying, you can't be in two places at once. Now again, there could be explanations we don't see, scheduling changes, timing differences, incomplete information. But from the outside looking in, those details didn't seem to line up cleanly, and that's what kept the conversation going. Then another detail resurfaced, and this one added even more attention. Before the birth, Meghan had reportedly expressed interest in having a home birth at Frogmore Cottage. That idea fit the image many people had, something private, natural, and slightly outside traditional royal expectations. And for a while, that's what people believed was the plan. But then May 6, 2019 happened, and everything shifted suddenly. Without much build-up or explanation, it was announced that the birth had taken place at Portland Hospital instead.
I do now, yeah. I think because it's their currency, isn't it? They've made an awful lot of money, and again, it's their tact by having that association with the royal family.
It's the cachet and cash.
You mentioned sort of, the favoured journalists that they were briefing in the first instance that they weren't going to have titles, and now there's another screeching U-turn. We already had one of the U-turns about the racism.
Now, to be fair, hospital births are completely normal and often the safest option. That part wasn't the issue for most people. What stood out more was the lack of explanation. There wasn't a clear reason shared about why the plan appeared to change. No additional context, no quick clarification, and just a quiet shift in the story. And that silence, it didn't go unnoticed. When a public narrative is built around certain ideas, like privacy, independence, doing things differently, or that people naturally expect at least a small update if something major changes. But in this case, nothing was really addressed. From a commentary perspective, that's when people started going back and rechecking everything. Old interviews, previous statements, timelines, all of it. Because once one detail feels unclear, it can lead to bigger questions. And that's exactly when Piers Morgan stepped back into the conversation. And this time, he pushed even harder. He claimed that there may have been multiple versions of Archie's birth announcement prepared ahead of time. Now again, that's a claim, not confirmed. But it definitely caught attention because it led people to ask, why would something so personal have different versions ready in advance? Why prepare multiple narratives for the same moment? To some, that idea sounded strategic, almost like planning different outcomes depending on how things played out publicly. Others, of course, would say there are reasonable explanations behind the scenes. But either way, that claim became a major point of debate. And once that question was out there, it didn't go away easily. Now here's where things get even more intense, and because the focus shifted to how everything was actually handled behind the scenes.
Fascinating reporting coming from News Nation, the US news channel, and its head of entertainment, Paula Frolic, who reveals Prince William to change the monarchy forever.
Within the royal family that Prince William was forced to deny.
Michael, you want to jump in?
Wasn't right.
I was going to say,
and this is another example.
Yes, I totally agree.
Her Majesty, His Majesty the King, has played a blinder in all this because he let it be known from the very outset that they were welcome to come, Meghan and Harry, to the coronation, putting the ball firmly in their court. If they decline, it will make them look small-minded, petty, mean-minded.
The timing around the birth announcement became a huge talking point. According to reports, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle didn't immediately inform Buckingham Palace when labor began. Instead, the news was kept quiet for hours. By the time the palace was officially told, and early in the morning, they were already playing catch-up, trying to piece everything together with very little information. Within a short window, an announcement was released, but almost instantly, things didn't seem to line up. Because Harry and Meghan's version of events suggested the birth had happened earlier than what the palace had just shared. And that's where confusion kicked in. From the outside, it made the palace look disorganized, like they didn't have control of their own messaging. But others saw it differently. Some believe this wasn't just miscommunication, but a situation where information was being handled very tightly, with timing playing a major role in how the story reached the public. Now again, that's interpretation, not confirmed fact, but it definitely raised questions about who was shaping the narrative and how. And of course, Piers Morgan didn't stay quiet about it. He pointed to this moment as an example of what he believed was a pattern, where every detail, every update, every announcement was carefully controlled. From his perspective, it wasn't just about sharing news, it was about managing how that news was received. Others would argue that public figures often handle private moments differently, especially when privacy is a priority. But still, the conversation kept building. Then things took another turn when people started looking back at Meghan's interview with Oprah Winfrey. In that interview, Meghan described feeling isolated at times during her pregnancy, suggesting she didn't always feel fully supported.
Politically in America, which is on and off with her, isn't it? She can't do it with the title, so what's she worried about? Just drop out, but she won't, because she's so determined to get her own back. And that it needs someone strong like William who's going to absolutely push it through.
It was emotional, and it connected with a lot of viewers. But then separate reports began circulating that painted a different picture. According to those claims, again not officially confirmed, palace staff were actually going out of their way to meet her requests. There were suggestions that schedules were being adjusted, plans were being changed, and extra effort was being made behind the scenes to accommodate her needs. Some even claimed staff were working extended hours to keep up with last-minute changes. Now, whether that's fully accurate or not, it added another layer to the discussion, because it created two very different perspectives. On one side, a story of feeling unsupported, and on the other, claims of significant behind-the-scenes assistance. And that contrast is what people couldn't stop talking about. Another point that came up involved meetings and briefings. According to some reports, Meghan was invited to attend certain discussions multiple times but didn't always take part. Later on, those same situations were interpreted by some as moments of exclusion. Now again, this depends entirely on perspective. Some see it as missed opportunities, others see it as a breakdown in communication. But once those details entered the public conversation, they added even more complexity to the story.
First thing is that these children are being raised in some type of freak show. You know, it's like they are Michael Jackson's children who were paraded to the world but covered up in masks. Yeah, but then remember, he covered their identities and their faces in masks. You know, so of course they're very likely to be messed up, growing up with such messed up parents who are using them in such a mucked up manner. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say on the titles is that I think what Prince William is acutely aware of, and this has certainly been my reporting, is that look at what happened when you allowed to run rampant for so many years, chasing the cat.
Piers Morgan leaned into this heavily. He argued that what was being presented publicly didn't fully match what was happening behind the scenes. From his point of view, the situation wasn't about lack of support, but about how those experiences were later described. Others strongly disagree with that interpretation, but regardless of where people stand, one thing is clear. Once these different versions started circulating, public opinion didn't stay the same. People began re-evaluating everything, past interviews, public statements, timelines, all of it, because when multiple perspectives exist side by side, it naturally leads to more questions. And once those questions start building, they're not easy to ignore. That's when the bigger conversation really took off. Not just about one moment, but about the overall story, how it was presented, and what might still be unclear. Now here's where things took an even sharper turn. Because while all these claims were spreading, Meghan's response was nothing. No statement, no quick denial, no spokesperson stepping in to clear things up, and that stood out. Because in the past, Meghan Markle hasn't been silent when it comes to stories she disagrees with. There have been legal actions, public responses, and people close to her speaking out. But this time, complete silence. And from a commentary point of view, that's what really fueled the conversation. Piers Morgan kept repeating the same idea, that silence isn't neutral.
2 years of the royal family are a bunch of racists flying around the world. I was in America through a lot of that period, and they all believed it because it had appeared on Oprah. Then he says, I never meant to say anything about racism. What are you all talking about? It's the beastly media. Well, now Harry and Meghan's lick-spittle client journalist Omid Scobie, the man who lied about his age, said he was 33 when in fact he was 38, a bit older now.
He argued that when serious claims are being discussed publicly, saying nothing can send its own kind of message. Now, of course, others would say silence can also be about privacy, or choosing not to engage with speculation. But online, people didn't all see it that way. You could literally watch opinions shift in real time. Some who had defended Meghan strongly before started hesitating. The tone of conversations changed from, "This is unfair," to, "Wait, what's really going on here?" And one question kept coming up again and again. If this isn't accurate, why not address it? The longer things stayed quiet, the louder those questions got. Meanwhile, critics filled that silence fast. Videos were rewatched, timelines reposted, clips analyzed frame by frame. People started putting everything side by side, trying to connect details and make sense of it all. And without any official response, speculation didn't just stay speculation, it started turning into stronger opinions. Not because anything was fully proven, but because nothing was being directly challenged either. Then there was another detail people couldn't ignore. Prince Harry also stayed completely silent, and that surprised a lot of people. Because he's spoken before about protecting his family and responding to media narratives. He's defended Meghan publicly in multiple situations. But in this case, nothing. No statement, no pushback, not even a brief comment about privacy. Now again, there could be reasons behind that. Legal advice, personal choice, or simply not wanting to add more attention. But from a public perspective, that silence raised even more questions. Because people started thinking, if these claims were completely off, wouldn't there be some kind of response? And once that doubt started building, it spread quickly. Even past moments started getting re-examined. The interview with Oprah Winfrey, which once felt powerful and emotional to many viewers, began to be looked at differently by some. Piers Morgan, in particular, broke it down, piece by piece. He pointed out moments where the timing of pauses, the way emotions built, and the delivery of certain lines felt very controlled to him. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean anything was staged. That's just his interpretation. But once people started noticing those details, it changed how some viewers experienced it. He even compared that interview to Meghan's other appearances, podcasts, speeches, and previous interviews. According to his view, there was a consistent pattern in how emotional moments were delivered. A certain rhythm, a build-up, and then a release. Some people saw that as natural communication, and others saw it as very polished storytelling. And once that idea took hold, it became hard for some viewers to ignore. What once felt completely raw started to feel more structured to them. Again, that's perception, not proven fact. But perception plays a huge role in how stories unfold publicly. One of the most debated points he made was about how motherhood was presented in Meghan's public image. He suggested that focusing on pregnancy, vulnerability, and personal pressure became a powerful way to shape how people responded to criticism. Supporters strongly disagreed with that take, while critics felt it explained a lot. And that divide? It only made the conversation even bigger. Now here's where the conversation really hits its peak, because at this stage, it's no longer just about detail, it's about perception. According to Piers Morgan, the situation created what he described as a kind of protective barrier around Meghan. From his perspective, questioning anything, even small inconsistencies, quickly became uncomfortable territory for people. Because the moment those questions came up, the focus often shifted back to pregnancy, stress, and emotional pressure. Now, to be fair, society naturally shows care and respect toward expectant mothers. That's completely normal. But Piers argued that this made it harder for open discussion to happen because criticism, even when framed as curiosity, could be seen as crossing a line. Others strongly disagree with that view, saying people were simply being respectful. But either way, it added another layer to the conversation, because some began asking, if everything is clear, why does the situation feel so guarded? And that's where the bigger issue started to take shape. Trust. By this point, people weren't just looking at one moment anymore. They were looking at everything together: photos, timelines, reported details, shifting narratives, and the ongoing silence. And when all of that gets combined, it stops being about one topic and turns into something much bigger, a question of credibility. Because when small doubts start to build, they don't always explode right away. They sit there, quietly, and over time, they change how people see everything. Suddenly, every interview gets analyzed more closely. Every statement gets picked apart. Every appearance gets viewed through a different lens. Not out of anger, but out of uncertainty. And that's what makes it so powerful. Because once trust starts to weaken even slightly, every detail begins to feel more important. From a commentary perspective, this situation didn't grow from one single moment. It built up gradually. Different timelines, moments that didn't fully align, carefully presented appearances, and unanswered questions. Each piece on its own might not seem huge, but together, they created a bigger picture that people couldn't ignore. And when that picture doesn't feel fully clear, people start filling in the gaps themselves. Sometimes fairly, sometimes not. That's just how public perception works. The comparisons didn't help either. For example, Catherine, Princess of Wales, continued to represent a very traditional and open approach to royal life. Public appearances, shared moments, clear timelines. Everything felt structured and familiar to audiences. Meanwhile, Meghan's approach felt more private, more controlled, and at times harder for people to fully understand. Now, that doesn't automatically mean anything negative. It just means it was different, but in a space where people are used to a certain level of openness, differences stand out quickly. And when those differences aren't explained clearly, they can lead to more questions. Over time, those questions can turn into lasting opinions, and once opinions settle in, they're not easy to change. This wasn't one big moment that suddenly changed everything. It was gradual, a slow shift in how people saw the story. And once that shift happened, it became part of the bigger conversation that still continues today. Now here's the real question. What do you think about all of this? Do these claims raise valid question, or is this all being overanalyzed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because this is one of those topics where everyone sees it a little differently. If you made it this far, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves celebrity drama, and subscribe for more breakdowns just like this. And before you go, check out the next video popping up on your screen right now. It dives even deeper into another story you definitely don't want to miss. See you in the next one.